Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site that covers, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. Recording with my co-host, Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, in episode 737. And it is our first off-season show where we kick it off about the coaching news. We care nothing at this point about the Cardinals' 37-20 loss to the Los Angeles Rams on Sunday. That's done and over with. It went almost exactly as how we expected it to be. The Cardinals did compete early. They did all right. They looked good in the middle and then absolutely fell apart. They got outgained 217 yards to -8 after they took the lead before their final drive in garbage time, and they lose by 3 scores again. They go 0-6 in the division. They finish 3-14. The losingest, that's not really a word, the most losses in a season in franchise history, which led to Jonathan Gannon getting fired. And that is what this show is about. It is about Jonathan Gannon's firing and the new coaching search. I mean, for us who talk about the Cardinals and write content about the Cardinals, in a way, this is good for business. But as a fan, this is a terrible thing for business. And we want to just react to the firing at first. They go 3-14. Initially, they send out, and this is the thing that's kind of interesting, is that they sent out the press release announcing that Gannon was going to address the media at 2 p.m. on Monday like he normally does and stuff like that. In years past, that they have held off on that. So the initial belief, at least on Sunday night, that he would remain their head coach, when they slept on it, as Michael Bidwell said, or maybe they were just, or honestly, maybe that was just cloak and dagger. They're like, let's send this press release out and then change it in the morning. But when you heard the news, when you got the tweet that said Gannon was out, we've already had our opinions about whether he should be. And, we believe that is warranted in that situation. How surprised were you that it happened?
I mean, the surprising thing is that they pulled the trigger, right? I think you and I had done an excellent job of kind of laying out the reasoning for the firing, that it needed to happen. But we also, I think, did an excellent job of explaining why it was unlikely. And then especially with what was coming, kind of background noise at the time, but then became, front or foreground noise of the impending parting of Cliff Kingsbury, because some of that money helps offset what the Cardinals still owe Cliff. And so you were thinking to yourself, right, like, Cliff's gonna get let go if he doesn't latch on somewhere, if he does another Cliff thing where he goes to, what was it, Thailand or the Philippines, or
It was in Thailand. That was
fun year to recharge his battery. They're on the hook for a lot of money.
Yes.
And so then to be on the hook for at least one more year, I know there was some banter between Darren Urban, Kent Summers, and some fans that the Cardinals are unique in their coaching contracts, and that fifth year is typically a mutual option. So I'm not sure how mutual options work.
So my belief is because, and I looked back at the press release, I believe Gannon was the first coach that we've seen to get just a straight 5-year deal.
Okay.
Because it was announced as such. Cliff's original contract, Wilkes' original contract. I believe Arians, and I'd have to go all the way back to my press releases. I'm pretty sure I have all of them in my emails. But Cliff's and Steve Wilkes were both announced as 4-year deals with a 5th-year option. And Gannon's, the press release said a 5-year contract. And basically everything that we've heard reported is that he had 2 years left on his deal. So the Cardinals still must pay Gannon in 2026 and 2027. They still will pay Cliff Kingsbury for 2026 and 2027 because his extension kicked in after he was fired. And so,
right.
And we heard maybe it was about $7.5 million a year on average for Cliff. And I have to imagine that Gannon's coming out of what he was probably between 3 and 5 million a year.
Yeah, I was going to say 4. So yeah, between 3 and 5. And so you look at it, let's just say that the Commander Skins were paying him $2.5 million, right? That's $5 million. That's $9 million in coaching contracts. Remember, in coaches' contracts, that doesn't go towards salary cap and all that stuff, right?
Which is why we don't know anything about the numbers.
Right. And so, all of that is really what made this interesting, because we can definitely all agree that there are times that it is unquestionable that Michael Bidwill is cheap. I mean, it's just unquestionable.
But charging the players for food, things like that, the lack of perks and things like those little things, those are the 100%. Hey, they just don't. But we don't know about the coaches' salaries.
But for him to now be on the hook, let's just very conservatively say for probably around $13 million for 2 years. And again, I don't know how assistant coaches' contracts work in terms of if they're fired, if they get paid. Like I don't know if it works like head coaches' contracts, but like if he hires somebody for that in that 3 to 5 million range, we're talking about him being on the hook for probably between 13 and 15 million dollars for the next 2 years for a head coach.
Which led to the question, of course, that I will say this, that I don't get to be part of it. Howard doesn't get to be part of those press conferences and ask questions anymore, as I detailed in one of the episodes a few months ago. However, this press conference had the hardest hitting questions, the toughest questions asked of the Cardinals brass, honestly, than I've ever heard reporters go at the owner, the GM. The hardest hitting questions I've heard asked in the 15 years I've been doing this. It was really impressive.
Well, I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is Theo Mackey does a great job, and we've talked about Theo's work on this podcast.
It's Teo, by the way. It's Teo.
Sorry, my bad. I don't. I just read.
You've only seen it in writing, but
yeah,
it's Teo.
I don't read I don't listen to anything anybody talks about, but I do read his work, and but yeah. So when you talk about Teo. And what I think people don't understand is that it's very hard to pull a credential from the local paper. It's right. Much more difficult than, and Jess and I can laugh about this, but blogs, like when Jess and I at separate times.
Well, and even that, because you can't pull, like, aside from violations to the media policy, which Teo does not do. He doesn't even come close to those. You can't. We have the backing of the Pro Football Writers Association and the league media policy. You can't pull a credential for disagreements. You can do it. You can do it for violations, but ultimately, and this is what happened with me and Howard, is the way around that is because the clubs get to decide what organizations they credential. And they decided that CardsWire and other wire sites wouldn't be credentialed. You can't do that with the Arizona Republic. You can't do that because it is the local paper. It is their news organization. There's no way to say we're not letting the local paper do it. that would be silly.
Right. And so that all lends to him being able to, and the thing is with Teo is he's never disrespectful. I think that's a very important distinction that people understand is, I see how people want things addressed on the tweets. And I'm like, guys, there's no way that
can't be an a-hole with your questions. That
right.
You don't get answers like that.
But you can definitely and understandably be aggressive. And Teo is very aggressive with his questions. And I think when you saw some of the pushback from specifically Monty Ossenfort with regards to has he done enough in the draft, and you get a response of like, well, if you're using PFF grades, it's like, no.
Teo didn't mention PFF grades in that question, mind you. He mentioned the Pro Bowls.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you start to tell on yourself as a general manager, right? Like, oh, well, if you're going to use that, it's like, no, I'm not using that. You're using that. I'm asking legitimate questions about specific benchmarks like Pro Bowls, All Pros, things of that nature. And there's an unquestioned reality that Monty Ossenfort has not drafted a single Pro Bowler, not one. We can quibble over
Cardinals 2 Pro Bowlers of our Steve Keim guys, Buda Baker, Trey McBride. So,
and we can quibble. I mean, we can definitely quibble over like, should they have, should Paris Johnson have gotten a nod over maybe Trent Williams? Yeah, probably this year specifically. I don't think anybody, like any reasonable fan, would say no, but like it didn't happen. So it doesn't matter what our thoughts are because it didn't happen. And so, when you're pressed on that and your response is to guffaw and act like, well, if you're attributing it to well, no, I didn't reference PFF. You're bringing up PFF. I'm asking about the fact that you haven't drafted a single solitary Pro Bowler. And so is that on you, the talent evaluator, or is that on the coaches? And did that lend itself to this decision? It makes it really hard, and something we'll talk about down the road. It makes it really hard to take anything that happens after that seriously, right, Jess?
Yeah, it really did. For me, ultimately, when it comes down to my reaction is like, well, good for them for making the firing. Good for them, because 3-14, we said, like, we go back a year ago or before the season, we felt that Jonathan Gannon's job security was very, very high, and it would take an absolute disaster for him to get fired. Disaster happened, he gets fired. That makes sense. I wasn't overly surprised, but I was like, all right. They are thinking about winning. They weren't thinking about money. They weren't thinking of, because it would have been easy to not fire him because of the financials that we've already gone over. Because the truth is, Gannon has big support in the locker room too. Now, that's all public facing support, and players do not and kind of can't say things disparaging against the organization or like even remotely critical. I got a hold of one of the Cardinals contracts for a player a while back, and you will void your guarantees if you are, I can't remember what the wording was for it, but it had to do with speaking negatively of the organization. So granted, you can be indifferent and say, yeah, he did really well with us, but that's not up to me. So, and then there's guys who are saying, yeah, he absolutely deserves another chance. Because players know, like, they feel that he put them in position to do things, and they failed as a roster, as a team, and that says a lot about him. And so while I wasn't surprised, I was like, but that brings to another topic is, well, what now? But coming up next on the Rise of Secret podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's talk about the reaction to what and react to what Michael Bidwill said about it, and whether or not we trust Bonnie Austin-Fort in this round of coaching interviews. It's coming next on Rise of Secret. We're back on the Rise of Secret podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. It was interesting, and we spoke about this before the show, and I don't remember what Michael Bidwill said about Cliff Kingsbury when he was let go, but I remember how effusive he was in his praise about Steve Wilkes as a human being, as a hard worker, the respect that everyone around the organization had. And then to do that again for Jonathan Gannon. And even after, like, he was fired. A dude was fired. And then the organization on social media is giving Jonathan Gannon a big thank you graphic. That says something about the quality of person. But I find it fascinating that a guy you respect and you believe in so much, and you're like, well, losses, so we're firing you. I'm like, so you don't really believe in him? I don't know. I like hearing that because it says something about the individual as a coach and as a human being, which that those sort of things matter. But I always find it interesting when they gush about the guy they literally just fired.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the man that Gannon was, or is, I guess, is a weird way to put that. Who Gannon is as a man, because like you said, it's insane the outpouring of support that we're seeing from that. That being said, it does seem like that there was more love for him as a man than there necessarily was for him as a coach. Does that make sense? Like as a schemer and a decision maker.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I think, sorry, real quick. I think if you think about it, like a lot of the things that were said were not necessarily like, oh, he's a guy that was just amazing, getting us prepared and like, in-game decision making and blah blah blah. It was like, oh, he was such a great man that did this and that for us to help us get ready. And you're like, okay, but what about like as a coach? And there was never anything discussed about that. And I don't know, man. It, like you said, it was interesting to see the outpouring of support from within the organization when it happened, because it almost seems counterintuitive, right? To fire a guy that everybody loves.
Yeah, well, and culture-wise, they love the culture that he brought, and I'm like, yeah, should like I think like, and the idea that someone's going to come in and build off of that is, I don't know, because the culture was kind of Gannon, and that then, and every coach comes in and tries to do something a little bit different, and so the previous culture doesn't necessarily carry over. Look at how it went from between Arians and Wilkes. It was vastly different. They come in with their own program, their own belief, their own slogans, and those locker rooms will take on the personality of their head coach. And so it was great culture, like in terms of being teammates, putting team first. But will that continue? Well, and part of that is roster construction, which leads to the other question is Jonathan, Monty Austinfort is now in charge of bringing in a new head coach. Do we trust him to be able to get the Cardinals where they won't need to be? Because we've got 3 years of roster moves, things not working out, injuries, the sudden backpedaling with Kyler Murray. That's the question. Like, did Monty do enough with the roster? Maybe. Were they just unlucky with all the injuries? But like Monty was talking about the amount of young players who were playing, and like those young players weren't playing because they were developed. They were playing out of necessity. So don't give me that. Cody Simon, yeah, Cody Simon only played because Mac Wilson got hurt. He wasn't developed into a starter. John Gaines was only playing because Evan Brown had a family issue and didn't come back for 5 weeks. Soft benching maybe, or just don't come back. I don't know. Darius Robinson hadn't done anything. Jordan Birch is playing, but they're rotational guys. You're getting more playing time out of Rabbit. Keaton Crawford's playing only because of injuries. And so, like, talking about the number of rookies playing, they're young players playing, and yes, they've got a decent young core, but, they have a young core. We don't know how decent they are yet overall is kind of the issue.
And you go back to it, like I saw a lot of people, like it's interesting to see how people go back and forth, right? Like they look at reality of like there have been no, no Pro Bowlers selected by Monty Austinfort, but it's like at the same time they're like, well, but look at this guy, and this guy and this guy. So you go back and we don't have to go through every single one, but you look at it and you go, okay, the best player from the first draft is clearly Paris Johnson Jr. He's very close to, if not already, an unquestionable franchise left tackle. The biggest concern with Paris is going to continue to be his health. He, after a rookie year where he started all 17 games, he only or played in all 17 games, started but played. He missed 3
snaps all year.
Yeah, he missed 3 last year, and then he missed 5 this year, in which was probably his best season, right? So it's a concern that it's going the wrong way in terms of games played. That being said, unquestioned. Number 2 was Garrett Williams, coming into this year. But now with an Achilles tear and a down season, most people would probably say Michael Wilson is the second best player from that draft, which if you're getting a guy that's a 1,000-yard receiver in the 3rd round, you're doing fairly well. 1,000-yard receivers are not what they were once, but I do understand the praise, right? BJ Ojulari's basically been an injury bust. We won't blame play. And then John Gaines had some flashes.
Barely got playing time this year.
Yes,
barely
had some flashes this year. The rest of the Keitrell Clark's the guy that's started the most games outside of that. And he is, I mean, honestly, Dante Stills from a draft, where he was drafted and
valuable guys. And this year was basically invisible.
Yeah.
This year.
And then you go to last year's draft, which is trending towards being one of the worst drafts in franchise history.
D-Rob hasn't, like, Darius Robinson is barely starting to make some sort of statistical impact. Max Melton,
we don't even know what's happening.
Yeah. He apparently re-injured the heel before the game after he was a full pro, so I don't know, but it felt like he just got
benched,
pushed out of the way. Basically just got pushed out because I think they liked the play of Denzel Burke, which, let's be fair, Denzel Burke had a pretty all right rookie season.
Right. Really, really, especially again for a 5th round pick. But you look at it, Trey Benson's been, again, an injury riddled problem. Isaiah Adams had a very nice second half of the season. No question about that. Tip Ryman, we have no idea because Jacoby Brissett killed him. Elijah Jones got in a game. So that was.
He got in a game and looked okay.
Rabbit, you talked about being played more, but there are concerns.
Who knows now, but he lines up. He's set up to be a starter this next year. Is just Jalen Thompson's contract expires, and Jalen Thompson is like, as long as you're paying Jalen Thompson like average safety money, cool, because he's been nothing more than just an adequate safety out there for the last 2 years.
We've had a single game started by Christian Jones. Xavier Thomas no longer on the roster. Taywan Palmer got snaps for the first time, and Jaden Davis got snaps the last 3 games. So, but again, that, lumping in Marv into that group as well, there is not anything to be excited about in that entire group yet. Doesn't mean that can't happen in year 3. Just in 2 years, there's not anything to be excited about. And then this year, it is teaming with. It could be really, really good, but it's also teaming with. We don't even know what the injury to Walter Nolan is.
Right.
It required surgery. Could have just been a meniscus, type cartilage thing. That's a 12-week recovery. We don't know because unless Walter and his agent tell us, we'll never know. We talked about the Will Johnson stuff. Only played in 12 games. Basically, every situation that was brought up pre-draft came to fruition in terms of, when he's on the field, he's fine. It's just about getting him on the field. And then there were concerns late in the year about his,
focus.
Engagement and focus on things. Jordan Birch, you mentioned. Cody Simon, you mentioned. Denzel Burke is without a doubt the standout from this class this year. Hayden Connor got a couple reps, and like you said, Crawford played. So there's not. Here's what I'll say. There's not one guy outside of Paris Johnson Jr. that you're like, oh, he'd start on every team in the NFL.
The guy you're excited about is Walter Nolan, but dadgummit, the luck he had this year.
Right. I mean, 2 sacks in 6 games. I know people will be like, well, that's just 6 sacks if he plays the whole season. Yeah, 6 sacks.
It was the disruption with which he played when he was on the field.
Right, and 6 sacks from an interior lineman in playing 43% of the snaps when he was on the field. I mean, in 6 games, Jess, this dude only had 169 snaps. That's it. He wasn't even playing 30 snaps a game. Like, that is, like, this dude could be 7 pressures, 2 sacks, 3 quarterback knockdowns in 30 snaps a game, basically. That is, like, this dude could be a star, but he also may never play again. We don't know. Like, we don't even know if the leg was amputated. We don't know if the leg's still there. Like, I'm being facetious somewhat, but the reality is we just don't know. So yeah, I mean, so you can say like, oh, I love these guys, or I love what they did, or I love this or that. It's like, what they, like, you don't have anything on these guys. Like, there's nothing to write home about on any, and you and I love Harris. We love most of these picks. Like, we're not saying this to be jerks. We're not saying this to be like, oh, Marv is a bust. No, we still believe in Marv fully, but you can't say that Monty's hit a home run yet. You can't from any of these picks. Now, we're hopeful that the next step is that he, a couple of these guys become home runs, but we can't say that yet. And so that's a
major
concern.
Question. And maybe the belief is as well is that they like the talent and believe the coaches failed to develop them.
And by the way, can I ask you something? And I get it. This whole dog and pony show today or yesterday, whatever day it was, I get you're going to get a lot of coach speak, and I know it wasn't coaches, but you're going to get a lot of coach speak. But like, am I naive to be like, why not just say that? Be like, hey, we feel like some of the players that we are really excited about their future aren't being developed as we had hoped. And so that's, one of the reasons. Like, I don't think that's a shot at Gannon. I think that's just a reality of like anything else, right? Like, oh, we weren't winning as much as we want to. Okay. I mean, that's obvious. Oh, you're right. You're right, Teo. We have not drafted a Pro Bowler, and that's a problem for me because I truly believe that they're good enough to. I truly believe that they're good enough to compete and be in those situations. So that's what my question is like, why is this not something that is discussed, and why do we kind of look at it of like,
there are unspoken rules? I'm pretty sure that one, you fired a guy where you had a good relationship, and then if you say, well, they didn't develop it, that comes off as an affront, as you're attacking the guy leaving, the guy out the door. And two, the other part is kind of the same thing what Gannon does with players. It's not publicly criticizing. People notice that. Like, coaches they'll be interviewing will see what the comments made. And so I wish that people could just be straightforward and say, we love Gannon, what we did, which is like, we feel like, and Monty could just simply say this, I'm really excited about the players and they haven't reached their potential yet. And that's part of what we're hoping to
right
fix.
Exactly.
Without attacking Gannon by saying, they didn't develop. It's like, we don't think they've reached their potential yet. And that's one of the goals that we have with this next head coach, is to bring the most out of the players that we believe in.
Yeah. And that's what, so we'll see what happens, but at this rate, as much as a pop out as it might sound, it's a coin flip if Monty's worth anything.
Right. But like, as general managers go, that's kind of what you got to do, right? If you believe the direction that they went in, the coach is always going to get fired first. And then you're going to get, just like you give the coach couple of 3 years, okay, you get bad year. Oh, there's growth. Oh, it was a disaster. Oh, we know you're not the right coach. But then you look at the general manager, and if you thought in the moment that what the things that we're doing were fine and that the out result is bad, so now, oh, well, maybe it was the coach, and so you have to let him to make one more coaching hire.
Right.
That's for me is like when Steve Keim hired Arians, okay, that worked out. When he hired Wilkes, oh, that was a disaster. He shouldn't have survived that. He shouldn't have survived that. He should have been gone then, because you had one coach that worked out, sort of, and then the second one, no. You shouldn't get to pick another failed coach. And so I think this is the case where, all right, you hitched your wagon to Gannon. It looked like it was okay. Things looked good. Okay, you get one more shot. You get one more shot at this. And so that sort of makes sense to me in that. But that brings us to this next part. Coming next on the Rise Receiver podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. We're going to talk about potential candidates, the ones we know they want to target, other names that make sense, and what we think. That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast. This is our Cardinals Talk on the Web, episode 737, as we talk about the Cardinals coaching situation, moving on from Jonathan Gannon. We know a few names that the Cardinals have expressed interest in already, and one came through as we were recording. So the three that we know: Brian Flores, defensive coordinator. Wait, was Flores one of the official ones? Or so there's Clint Kubiak, Robert Saleh. Who was the third?
Let me see here. I got it in our text, but Vance Joseph.
Vance Joseph. Okay, yeah. So Vance Joseph.
And then Anthony Weaver from the Dolphins.
Oh, did that come through as well? Thomas Brown, passing coordinator of the Patriots, also came through.
Okay.
So there's 5 names we know of that have come out. So you've got Vance Joseph, guy well known here, well respected here, by the way. Many believe that he could have gotten the job, that there was a decent chance he could have taken over for Cliff Kingsbury back in 2023. You got Robert Saleh, fired as head coach of the Jets. Great defensive coordinator, twice over once with the 49ers, and then made do defensively with all the injuries. Clint Kubiak, the rising offensive coordinator. Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator that made waves in Miami and Baltimore. And then Thomas Brown, passing game coordinator for the New England Patriots. Also on the tape, also available for the Cardinals, are their 3 finalists last time around: Brian Flores, Mike Kafka, and Lou Anarumo. And so those guys are available. You've got the fired head coaches like Mike McCarthy's available if you want to go that route, but he turned the Cardinals down once before. What do you think of this first round of names? Vance Joseph, Robert Saleh, Clint Kubiak, Thomas Brown, and Anthony Weaver. What do you think of those names so far?
I mean, I like Kubiak a lot. I like his, coming from a very successful NFL lineage. Obviously, Gary Kubiak, his father. I think he gets undersold on what happened in New Orleans slightly.
Like the head coach was fired. Like he got fired. No, the head coach got fired, and so he was let go.
Yeah. And the offense wasn't bad.
No, well, and he comes from the Shanahan tree, because not only did he work for Kyle Shanahan, he is the son of Gary Kubiak, who was a quarterback and a coach under Mike Shanahan. So it's that offensive scheme, which we've seen have success over and over again with lots of different players, is a good one. Is he another? Like, here's the thing with the Cardinals. They haven't hired, so since Denny Green, they've been going with first-time head coaches. Ken Wisenhunt hadn't been a head coach yet. Bruce Arians, the closest thing because he was the interim coach for the Colts in 2012 before he was hired in 2013 by the Cardinals. Cliff Kingsbury was a head coach in college, never had any coaching experience in the NFL. Steve Wilkes, first-time head coach. And Jonathan Gannon, first-time head coach. And, what you get in this group, and Clint Kubiak is the same thing, never head coach. You've got Vance Joseph, previously a head coach. You've got Robert Saleh, previously a head coach. You've got Thomas Brown, not so much. Anthony Weaver, also not so much, but also, guys that have been around the block a little bit. Do you think that head coaching now, the Rooney Rule requires, so we know that Robert Saleh and Vance Joseph will meet those requirements. And the truth is, Vance Joseph should get an interview with the relationship he has with the organization, the fact that he has head coaching experience, the fact that he's had such a good defense with Denver the last couple of years. And so he deserves that. He deserves that interview, whether he's one that they really believe in or they're doing their due diligence as they must do. Of those names, is Kubiak your favorite overall?
Yeah, of those ones right now, yes. I don't know enough about the New England Patriots guy that you mentioned. That's just a reality. And then from there, you look at it and you go, Vance Joseph, he's been around some good guys recently, but we do know that he's a very strong-willed candidate that will have his own, wants to do things his own way, which could be a good thing too, right? Like, I don't think that's closer to what Bruce Arians was than obviously what we've seen from guys like Wilkes and Cliff, who had nothing in the NFL, and then Jonathan Gannon, who seemingly didn't have a lot of options right in the NFL, whereas like Vance will come in, he'll have guys that he wants to bring in with him, and he'll have some guys he can reach out to, which is going to be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, the Vance Joseph one is interesting because Gannon was young enough that he brought in all upstarts, like all guys that were also coming in. And Joseph has a variety. So he's not one of the young guys. He's not an old man, but he could bring in guys that he's been part of his staff that he's developing, along with he's got longtime NFL contacts. And so that's not a bad. And if you're talking about, because, Michael Bidwill wants to quick turnaround, good luck in the NFC West. You kind of, it's different. It's interesting how can you get that quick turnaround? Is it the coach? Is it the roster? Because if you look at kind of the turnarounds that you've seen, Denver, Seattle did it defensively. They became elite defenses, and that made things easier offensively. You had the Bears turn it around, but that was with better offense and protection for Caleb Williams, and their defense was fine. The names, so of those names, like Clint Kubiak gets me the most excited, but he kind of falls in the same categories of like other things. And it would be interesting, Anthony Weaver, because he was a really hot name. What is it, a year ago?
Yeah.
And they haven't brought it, but kind of the name that we've been talking about that maybe is what I like the most. I'm really starting to dig the idea of Brian Flores.
Yeah,
he has connections with Bonnie Ossenfort. He's interviewed twice for Cardinals jobs and been impressive in both times. The defense that he's going to bring in, it's going to, whether it's immediate or soon thereafter, will be very good, will be very tough. But we also saw how he basically broke Tua Tagovailoa to start things. And not that, Kyler Murray would, if he's brought back, would thrive in that environment because he is ultra competitive. He loves being coached hard. I don't have any doubt that would be a good. Now, who does he bring in to run the offense? That's always a different question. But you've got the balance of he's been a head coach before. He's been a failed head coach before. He's been a great coordinator. He's kind of done it all. Other names that would come up, Mike Kafka came in before Lou Anarumo. And didn't we kind of think that Anarumo, wasn't there a time in 2023, 3 years ago, when it looked like Anarumo was the favorite?
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing with him. And Anarumo is he's got age and sage wisdom, but like, is he going to be a guy that moves the needle at all? Not that matters. Let's be honest. I mean, the Cardinals need anything.
They don't need something to appease the fans. They need something to help with the
right.
Like,
and he'll be 60 before the season starts. Like, he'll turn 60 right at the season. Here's the question, right? He hasn't had a top he had a top 10 scoring defense this year for the first time in 3 years. He seems to get stale at each of the stops. He hasn't had a good yards defense since 2022. Those are things that are going to matter. I'm interested to see how it works out with Lou if he ever gets a head coaching shot. But doesn't he kind of have that Vic Fangio
that I was going to say that
feel to him, where like he is a very talented defense coordinator, but that might be all that he is able to do.
Well, kind of like Wade Phillips, Vic Fangio, only without the elite defenses.
Right.
That which is the downside to that. Like, yeah, like he could be like the Bruce Arians of defenses, but like Bruce had some really successful offenses. His numbers have been across all over the place, but Anarumo was kind of that kind of same situation, but it's not quite at the same level as Vic Fangio or Wade Phillips, who had elite dominant defenses that they led and just didn't work out as the lead guy. Now, there's two really big names that the Cardinals could go after, really big names. Pete Carroll, John Harbaugh. What would it say if the Cardinals went out and targeted one of these guys, championship winning, like long time? Granted, Pete Carroll in Las Vegas, that was a disaster, but it's a guy like John Harbaugh, stable organization, consistently competitive. Whether or not they'd accept an interview with the Cardinals, what would it say about the Cardinals if something came out that they were pursuing them?
I think it would say that they have a lot of that they're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think it would say that they're serious about wanting something better. Like, they're not just going to go with the best young guy who hasn't done it. They're willing to go get proven production, which is never it's never a guarantee moving forward. Denny Green, Buddy Ryan, to name every coaching, basically every route the Cardinals have gone, it's failed. It's failed pretty spectacularly, except for Wisenhunt and Arians, but even Wisenhunt failed spectacularly over the last 2 seasons.
Well, and you look at it, there's some other things too, right? We talked about before the head coaching reality of the Arizona Cardinals is that, outside of Bruce Arians, it's not like there's anybody to write home about since they were the Arizona Cardinals, right? I mean, Cliff was the closest to 500. Wiz was close to 500, but like you said, the last two seasons were such a spectacular flame out. Denny Green gets a lot of credit, but he had a 333 winning percentage. Dave McGinnis was just below our boy Jonathan Gannon. Vince Tobin had a below 400 winning percentage. Buddy Ryan had a below 400. Joe Bugle for the Cardinals had a below or above just above 300, but for his career, he's below 300, or I think he's right at 300 winning percentage. And Gene Stallings was the first, Cardinal or Arizona or Phoenix, I guess, technically, right, head coach. It's not like we're talking about guys that have moved the needle. Denny Green was the biggest needle mover. Maybe Buddy Ryan because of his bravado.
Buddy Ryan was at the time. Denny Green was again. But yeah, no one since then has been a needle mover except for Cliff for different reasons.
Right. Cliff was a needle mover because people mocked it, right?
And he was the hotshot college coach who wasn't successful there, but was this offensive mind, and they had the number one pick. But yeah, that moved the needle for different reasons. But people questioned that, and people thought that Jonathan Gannon was a moron.
Well, and so that's the thing. Is you look at these veteran guys that have been around. Specifically, you mentioned Pete Carroll and John Harbaugh. Now, here's what I'll say. Because the Pete Carroll situation in Arizona mimics slightly the Raiders situation, I would stay away from him. If it was a different situation, maybe, but there's just too many similarities there for me to want to run that back after I saw how spectacularly it failed this year, right? But that being said, obviously Harbaugh would be a home run. It's just, what would it take to convince him to come here? Because you mentioned it. I mean, the typical response to the Cardinals when they bring in those big guys is that they are being used as a springboard,
the leverage piece for something else. Or you're Mike McCarthy. He's like, no thanks. I'm not that interested in coaching.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just makes it really difficult. So, I mean, who would I prefer? I think Flores is a great fit. I don't know who he'd be able to bring from an OC standpoint. One of the things that you brought up that I kind of laughed about, but also agreed with, when I was texting you earlier, was the reality that if Flores showed up here, wouldn't it be crazy if they did keep Kyler? Because we know he has no problem basically going at quarterbacks or anybody that he doesn't feel like is doing the job.
He doesn't mince words. He doesn't mince words.
Right. He's a badass. I mean, he really is. So would that restore some people's lack of confidence in Kyler? Or would that make people go, oh, he's just another pawn? You know what I'm saying? The one thing
I don't know. I think Kyler could work, but I think and while the reports that there's a growing possibility that they could run it back with them, as much as I'd like to see that, I don't see a scenario where that's gonna fly.
No, I don't either, and I agree with you, and that's why I said it would be interesting if Flores
came in and said, "I want that guy."
Right,
I can fix that.
Right, because that is the opposite of everything we know about Flores with quarterbacks. Like, he's never going to be like, no, or he's never going to be like, yeah, I'll deal with it. Right. Like, he's going to be brutally honest.
He practically broke Tua, and before Mike McDaniel turned him into something good, before Tua broke himself. Yeesh. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about later in the week. We'll figure out stuff and how we're going to handle this offseason. And we'll have to do we'll also have to get on and do some playoff weekend props and predictions as well, as we can go a little less Cardinal centric. There's lots of Cardinals news, but it's still the playoffs. So we'll be back later this week. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, Rise up, see red.